During the atomic tests in the 1950s, the radioactive isotope Cesium-137 was released into the atmosphere as fallout. Present in the environment in very small amounts, the isotope has proved valuable to scientists like Greg Elliott from the Soil Conservation Service. Cesium-137 is absorbed onto the top layer of the soil and can easily be measured. The Pacolban trials have found that in stable, uneroded sites such as timbered areas and permanent pasture, cesium levels are easily measured. In cultivated and unstable areas, such as the vineyard, little or no cesium is found. The results mean researchers can map out the degree of soil erosion in any one area. The trials have already shown that at this vineyard, 6 tonnes of soil is lost per hectare each year. And according to Greg Elliott, the trials have applications for the land user.
It has strong applications, I see, in conservation farming, the promotion of conservation farming, by demonstrating to landholders that conservation farming really does hold the soil in place. But it has a value beyond that, because we can now show that there is an intrinsic value in doing this. Rather than being good stewardship, it also will, by being able to identify erosion and relate that to productivity, which we can measure at the same time, we can say, right, your erosion is costing you, and we can put it in dollar terms.
Inspecting the Pacolban site today was the Minister for Lands Advisory Council on Soil Conservation. The group, made up of people from various sectors of the community, has been touring the Hunter Valley for the last 2 days, inspecting soil conservation projects such as mine rehabilitation work and broadacre erosion at Merriwar. What's been the general impression of how we use our soil in the Hunter Valley?
Well, I think there's been a general impression of concern for the soil erosion that's been seen, but also one of appreciation for the efforts that they've seen in a number of areas. Where we're standing here, the attempts made for utilising conservation farming techniques in the vineyards certainly go well for demonstrating to others throughout the community that are undertaking similar land use that there are better ways of achieving it.
Are there any sort of problems we should be addressing now?
I think it's important for everybody, right throughout the community, to accept their level of responsibility for the use and management of land. Government, and indeed the service, like ourselves, can provide the catalyst, can provide a framework through extension advice, the gathering of resource data information, but we can't undertake the activities ourselves. So therefore, whether you're a landholder in a farming or vineyard growing operation, or whether indeed you're a person from the urban area using the land resource of weekends for recreational purposes, it's important that we realise that we must maintain a sustainable land resource base for the future social and economic welfare of the country.
Well, for farmers, I guess they've got to rely on their soils very much. For the broader community, what sort of cost is there in something like erosion to the community?
Well, I think that we could divide up into 2 areas. There's certainly the on-farm costs. When we lose soil, it's not going with the soil rates of creation occur. It's going to be many, many years before we see the soil formed again. So there's a loss of productivity, immediate loss of productivity to the landholder. I think the other cost that people really don't appreciate at this time, but I'd certainly like to emphasise, are the social and unpriced costs that result from the off-site effects. When soil moves from the landscape in situ from the farming lands, it then, as through sediment, ends up on roads and railway lines, in our harbours and streams, and that has an effect right across the ecosystem. So it's both the on-farm cost as well as the off-site cost that we've got to be concerned about.
Now, the service too has been fairly well behind the conservation farming movement. What can farmers start to do to try and alleviate some of the problems of erosion?
Well, conservation farming as a philosophy has a number of principles embodied in it. It's certainly at the basis of that is that let's see if we can be less aggressive with our soil. If we can maintain a protective cover, and this is what we see here in the vineyard today, that the use of green manure crops between the vines, between the rows, rather than bare fallow. So it's if we can get less aggressive and be as flexible as we possibly can. And in the past we used to see a lot of burning in the cropping lands. We've seen a trend now through to use of chemicals to maintain a cover so that we don't have the influence. But I'd like to emphasise that I think if we can reduce in the arable country the number of cultivations and aim as high as we can up the ladder to maintain a surface cover, because surface cover is going to protect the soil from both raindrop action as well as runoff water.
You mentioned the vineyard set up here, but are there any other areas you've seen in your 2-day visit in the Hunter Valley that shine out?
Yes, I was impressed this morning, as I'm sure other members of the committee were, with the mine rehabilitation work that's going on. Certainly the concerted effort there that has taken place all goes well for reclaiming those areas, which of course are bringing in revenue dollars for the state, and I was very impressed with that this morning.
Warwick, finally then, what's the grim side of the picture? Obviously we're talking about a big cost to the community in protecting our soils. What's the negative side if we don't look after the soils?
Well, the negative side is that in one way or another the land is used for either food, fibre or shelter. The very basis of our whole existence comes from the land. So I think we all have to be mindful, regardless of whether we live and work on the land or live and work in the cities, that we must maintain our sustainable resource base. Because if we don't maintain our sustainable resource base, you could well say that our livelihood in the very long term, and in some cases in the shorter term, with the erosion rates that are occurring in some situations, could be at risk. So it's important that the community as a whole accepts their level of responsibility in that.
The MSB officers' strike couldn't have come at a worse time. With 4 ships partly loaded with export coal, 3 others waiting outside the port and the miners' strike continuing, the dispute adds further credence to our worsening industrial record. In his findings this morning, Deputy President of the Industrial Commission John Varnum described the strike as planned and unjustified. He also called the employees' action illegal and in reality, if continued, could seriously jeopardise this state's international trade relations. Secretary of the MSB Officers Association, Tony Morrison, says the strike is regrettable but necessary.
When workers are placed in a position of needing to pursue what they see as their livelihood and the retention of jobs in the industry, these unfortunately again are the circumstances that occur.
Mr Morrison says the officers have avoided strike action ever since the MSB mooted the idea earlier in the year of replacing the 7-day 24-hour roster with a 5-day one. The reason was the downturn in the coal industry and consequently a slowing down in port activity. But Mr Morrison says there is enough work to justify the 7-day roster.
I think what the board is trying to say there is that every minute of the day coal has to be loaded, otherwise there's not work. They assume that one just pops a ship in the berth, that there's no requirements for maintenance and clean-up operations relating to ships, but overall, yes, there is work available for people and our members in the Maritime Services Board on weekends.
The Officers Association today met with the MSB and is now waiting for the answers to a number of proposals put by the union. Mr Morrison says he's not sure when the 50 striking officers will meet or when they'll return to work, but he is emphatic about one point.
Is it simply coincidental that this strike coincides with the coal and allied miners' strike?
Yes, absolutely coincidental.
Considering the recent survey from the Drug and Alcohol Authority revealing Hunter youth take a large percentage of drugs and alcohol each week, the seminar was well attended by representatives of various community services, welfare workers and alcohol and drug educators. The aim of the seminar was to discuss the reasons for teenage drug and alcohol abuse and to look at government and community initiatives for reducing the problem. Coordinator of Drug and Alcohol Services for the Hunter, Rael Walsh, says the results of a high school survey shows Hunter region teenagers are regular users of tobacco, analgesics, alcohol and marijuana. He says the use of alcohol and marijuana is a particular cause for concern, and it's the Health Department's job to inform the community of the problem.
There are some steps that we can take. We, being the Health Department, the Education Department, we can provide more services, both for counselling and for education, which is the more important one with the high school population. But I think more importantly, there's some tough decisions the community needs to take. There are some powerful vested interests who are making quite handsome profits out of selling legal and illegal drugs to young people, and this is really where the community has to take some hard decisions.
So there should be pressure on those groups, do you think?
Well, I would like to see community and parent groups start to look at some of the pubs and clubs in their area that are serving substantial numbers of young people under the age of 18, and also some of the people that are selling them cigarettes, the advertisers that are targeting some of their products at young people.
The seminar was supported by the Lake Macquarie City Council and is the first of its kind in Newcastle. Seminar organiser, Community Development Officer Elizabeth Dunn, feels local councils should become more involved in educating the community on the drug and alcohol problem.
Particularly in this area, alcohol abuse is a community problem. It's something that is very much a social thing in this area, and I feel that people like councils who ratepayers look towards too, who are operating at that local community level, it's very important that they support this type of thing and be seen to encourage their ratepayers and the people in their communities to help have a look at it and do something about it.
Morley is currently running second in his class, and this will be his 6th Bridgestone International. His best results so far have been 3rd outright in 1985 and 4th outright in 1986. Morley designed and built the car himself, and he hopes a recent engine change to a Nissan 1600 will give him the advantage this Sunday.
I've replaced the motor and gearbox for this event, yes. I've rebuilt another motor and gearbox to make it more reliable and hopefully do better than last year.
You think that'll give you the advantage of getting better than 4th or 3rd that you've got in the last 2 years?
With the gear ratios and tyres from Yokohama, I think, yes, we will get up further than 4th and 3rd, I hope.
However, there will be stiff competition from other local drivers, including last year's national champion, Neville Boys.
Neville Boys from Cessnock is running very well. And there's a few others in their class. Craig Martin, who is very good all the time. They're going to be very hard to beat, but hopefully we'll be able to keep with them at a tighter track like Kempsey is.
Parties to the dispute were called before the local coal authority in Newcastle at 10 o'clock this morning. For 2 hours, Mr Cram heard submissions and then, in the absence of any undertaking by the unions, he ordered them to lift all bans and return to work immediately. Miners' Federation spokesman Bill Morgan says the order was not unexpected and there will be no compliance.
We won't be doing nothing till after Wednesday, when those talks take place with the Prime Minister in Canberra. They're important talks, and until such time as they are held, we won't be doing no recommendations to go back to work.
However, the government has already ruled out the setting up of a national coal authority with power over markets and prices. This is a stand appreciated by industry leaders like Coal and Allied Chief Bruce Thompson. But most unions remain adamant they want a marketing authority. One group which has already broken ranks with the 5 main unions in the current dispute is the Colliery Staff Association, which covers 550 clerical, engineering and supervisory staff at Coal and Allied. Assistant Secretary Pat Hunt says the stoppage is unwise.
We would have no opposition at all to industry-wide action aimed at getting the federal and state governments to wake up to just what's going on in the coal mining industry. But we feel that to take strike action within one company such as Coal and Allied probably does more to jeopardise the jobs of the people who at the moment look like having a fairly secure career there.
Have you had any reaction from the 5 other unions?
Oh yes, they're unhappy with the stance that we've taken, but we believe that we're entitled to our opinion and we respect their entitlement to their opinion.
The impact of the stoppage was brought home with great effect late this afternoon when Coal and Allied announced it has lost a sale of 136,000 tonnes. The federal Hunter had been standing off Newcastle and was ordered by the Israeli buyer to divert to South Africa. 2 other ships are waiting off to load Coal and Allied stock for Japan and Taiwan, and 2 more ships will arrive during the weekend.
According to Sharon O'Connor from the Australian Institute of Export, getting the paperwork right can mean the difference between a profit or a loss.
And a big loss if you don't sell, if you don't have a return sale, because the market is very competitive and your buyer can go elsewhere for goods.
The Institute of Export is a non-profit organisation dedicated to educating business people in exporting. They run educational seminars 5 times a year in Sydney and once a year in Newcastle and Wollongong, concentrating on export paperwork. Today was the first day of the Newcastle program. 15 local companies paid the $300 registration fee to send a representative to listen to some of Australia's leading people. In 3 days they will be taken through export documentation, shipping insurance, international banking and government role in export. Delegates are also to be shown a recently completed computer software package designed specifically for Australian exporters. Using the computer to store documents means numerous people can have access to them at the same time. Errors are reduced as the system can identify critical documents and bring them to the attention of management. According to Ms O'Connor, Australian exporters can't be too careful when it comes down to the paperwork.
We're up against the EEC markets, we're up against the American markets. We have to be like the Shining Knights, we have to be very good at everything we do.
In tonight's news, we take a look at work at the Horticultural Research Station at Gosford, which could help capitalise on the lucrative cut flower market.
For all the news,
join us tonight
at 6.
The play is fast-moving and funny. The plot revolves around a fabulously wealthy Italian businessman. He is kidnapped and during a madcap rescue bid, badly disfigured. This leads to a hopeless confusion of identities between the businessman and his rescuer. The plot offers many opportunities for comedy, and the skillful actors seize every chance.
It's definitely a farce. It's a comedy. It's a total send-up of a lot of sacred cows, if you like, the medical profession, the legal profession, and about the power of very, very wealthy capitalists.
How suitable is it to Newcastle audiences?
I think very suitable for Newcastle audiences. You seem to have a big place here called the BHP, and you've got the coal yards in the state that they're in, and that you have a situation where an awful lot of people are working for 1 or 2 employers.
The play can be seen tonight, tomorrow and Saturday nights at the Highfield Azuri Club.
Winning premierships is nothing new to Paul. This year's is his third straight. He finished the season with 84.5 winners. Next was Arthur Thompson and Max Lees was third. To Paul's tally can be added another 20, which ran past the post first in Sydney and country tracks. This afternoon he showed us his latest edition, 3-year-old Royal Handout. It was bought for $32,000 in New Zealand by car dealer Ken Delforce. Paul takes him to Sydney tomorrow week and expects him to do well.
Up to date, he's sort of done everything asked of him, David, and he's got to go down there to sort of prove himself against the better class 3-year-olds, and what he's done up to date, geez, I reckon he should have counted for himself pretty well.
With his breeding, he's a fairly unknown quantity. Does that worry you?
No, well, he's by a horse, Prince Echo. They're the oldest of them are 2-year-olds, and there's 2 or 3 perform pretty well in New Zealand, and he's a very well-bred horse in himself, and no, I think they should go on, and he should be a good sire, that horse.
Perry's Golden Touch also reached to the Jockeys Premiership. His stable jockey Robert Thompson was a clear winner ahead of Neil Ray and Stuart Plain. Top apprentice Scott Thurlow with 34 winners is also a member of Paul's stable. As for the next 12 months in Newcastle racing, he says there's no worries.
No, I think racing's booming here in Newcastle. It's a terrific centre to train horses on, and with the prize money as it is and going up all the time, it's a terrific centre here. Can only go ahead, I think.
As is now the tradition at Wallsend, the fair began with a parade, complete with the obligatory marching band. And a bullock team, as a reminder of how timber was hauled before the days of road and rail transport. On another historical note, the Wallsend Public School is celebrating its 125th anniversary this year, and so its pupils donned 19th century garb to march in the parade. It was definitely a day for ducks, or was that dragons, with umbrellas of all descriptions in abundance. Although Nelson Street was closed to traffic, the shops were definitely open, with brisk trade on all the bargains. The annual winter fair was opened by Deputy Lord Mayor Don Geddes, and with no further ado, the town crier gave 3 cheers for Wallsend.